Have you ever felt lost in an argument, questioning your own memory? Have you ever had the feeling that no matter what you do, it's never enough to satisfy someone close to you? If your answer is yes, it's possible that you've been a victim of manipulative tactics so subtle they go completely unnoticed. Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychoanalyst, dedicated his life to understanding the deepest mechanisms of the human psyche. In his studies, he identified behavioral patterns that reveal how certain people, including women, can use sophisticated psychological strategies to exercise emotional control over others. We're not talking about conspiracy theories or unfair generalizations, but rather real tactics that can transform healthy relationships into true emotional prisons. Today, I'm going to reveal to you the 8 darkest secrets of female manipulation, techniques that may be being used against you at this exact moment, without you realizing it. Prepare yourself for a revealing exploration that could completely change your perspective on relationships and, mainly, on how to protect yourself from these invisible psychological traps. What is female manipulation? Before we dive into the specific secrets, it's fundamental that we understand exactly what characterizes psychological manipulation. Manipulation is not simply influencing someone or expressing needs. That's part of normal human communication. True manipulation occurs when a person uses emotional, mental, or behavioral tactics to control, exploit, or harm another person for their own benefit. There's a crucial difference between healthy persuasion and destructive manipulation. For example, when a partner gently asks you to help with household chores, that's normal communication. However, when someone uses emotional blackmail, makes you feel unjustly guilty, or distorts reality to get what they want, we're facing manipulation. It's important to recognize that manipulation can be both conscious and unconscious. Some women develop these behaviors as defense mechanisms or strategies learned in childhood, without necessarily having the malicious intention to harm. However, regardless of intention, the effects on the victim are equally devastating. In modern society, certain social dynamics can inadvertently encourage manipulative behaviors as a way to obtain power or control in relationships. Understanding these nuances helps us identify when we're being targeted by these tactics. First secret: gaslighting. The subtle manipulation. Gaslighting represents one of the most insidious forms of psychological manipulation that exist. This technique consists of making the victim question their own perception of reality, memory, and mental sanity. The term derives from a theatrical play where a husband systematically manipulated his wife to make her believe she was going crazy. In the context of relationships, gaslighting manifests when a woman denies events that clearly happened, rewrites history according to her convenience, or insists that you're imagining things when you question problematic behaviors. For example, she may categorically claim that she never said something you clearly remember hearing, or she may minimize your emotional reactions by saying you're too sensitive or dramatic. A practical example would be when you confront a partner about behavior that bothered you, and she responds, "That never happened, you're making it up," even when you're absolutely certain of the facts. Gradually, this constant denial of your reality makes you begin to doubt your own memory and judgment. The long-term emotional impact of gaslighting is devastating. Victims develop chronic anxiety, depression, loss of self-confidence, and an unhealthy emotional dependence on the manipulator. They begin to constantly seek external validation to confirm their own perceptions, becoming emotionally vulnerable and easily controllable. Recognizing this pattern is the first step to breaking the destructive cycle. Second secret: punitive silence. The weapon of control. Punitive silence is a powerful psychological weapon that uses the absence of communication as a form of punishment and control. Different from necessary time for reflection during conflicts, punitive silence is deliberately used to cause emotional discomfort and force submission. When a woman employs this tactic, she simply stops talking to you after a disagreement, creating an emotionally charged and tense environment. This silence is not accompanied by explanations or attempts at resolution. It's purely and simply a form of punishment. The implicit message is clear. You displeased me. Now you'll suffer the consequences until you submit to my desires. Punitive silence is particularly effective because it exploits our basic human need for connection and approval. When someone important in our life emotionally freezes us, our natural instinct is to do anything to restore harmony. This creates a vicious cycle where the victim constantly gives in and apologizes, even when they did nothing wrong, just to break the anguishing silence. The impact of this technique on communication is profound and lasting. Victims learn to avoid topics that might provoke punitive silence, resulting in superficial communication and emotionally distant relationships. To respond adequately, it's essential not to beg for attention or apologize unnecessarily. Maintain your dignity and establish clear boundaries about acceptable behaviors in communication. Third secret, the guilt technique, making you feel responsible for everything. Manipulation through guilt is one of the most common and destructive tactics in relationships. This technique involves making the partner feel responsible for the woman's feelings, actions, and well-being, even when there's clearly no logical or fair connection between your actions and her reactions. Daily examples include phrases like, "If you really loved me, you'd do this for me. You're making me sad when you act like this." Or, "Because of you, now I'm feeling terrible." These statements artificially transfer her emotional responsibility to you, creating a dynamic where you become the constant healer of her feelings. The guilt technique is particularly destructive because it exploits our natural compassion and desire to make the people we love happy. Gradually, victims begin to walk on eggshells, constantly modifying their behavior in the impossible attempt to prevent any emotional discomfort for the manipulator. This results in loss of authenticity, increased anxiety, and development of codependency patterns. The impact extends beyond romantic relationships, affecting family relations, friendships, and even professional environments. Victims become hypervigilant about how their actions might affect others, losing the ability to establish healthy boundaries. To protect yourself, it's crucial to recognize that each person is responsible for their own feelings and emotional reactions, not you. Fourth secret, devaluation, making you doubt your worth. Systematic devaluation is a manipulative strategy specifically designed to erode the victim's self-esteem and confidence. This technique involves minimizing achievements, ignoring significant accomplishments, invalidating feelings, and constantly suggesting that you're not good enough or capable enough. Women who use this tactic may make seemingly innocent comments like, "That wasn't so difficult," when you achieve something important, or "Anyone could have done that," minimizing your efforts. They may also compare you unfavorably with other people, highlighting your supposed deficiencies while exalting others' qualities. The most dangerous aspect of devaluation is its gradual and subtle nature. At first, it may seem like just constructive criticism or brutal honesty. However, over time, this constant pattern of minimization creates a systematic erosion of your self-perception. You begin to internalize these negative messages, questioning your own capabilities and worth as a person. The psychological impact is profound and lasting. Victims develop imposter syndrome, performance anxiety, and a compulsive need for external validation. They stop pursuing new challenges or opportunities, fearing confirmation of their supposed inadequacy. To protect yourself, it's essential to recognize your own successes, keep a record of achievements, and surround yourself with people who genuinely celebrate your victories. Fifth secret, sentimental manipulation, using your emotions as a weapon. Sentimental manipulation transforms emotions themselves into tools of control and coercion. This tactic involves the strategic use of tears, excessive dramatization, and calculated emotional displays to make the partner give in to their desires or avoid legitimate confrontations about problematic behaviors. When confronted about inappropriate behavior, the emotional manipulator quickly shifts the focus of the discussion through an emotional explosion. She may begin crying intensely, claim she's being attacked or victimized, or even threaten self-harm to avoid responsibility. These reactions are disproportionate to the situation and serve primarily to divert attention from the real problem. The most insidious aspect of this technique is how it exploits the partner's natural empathy and compassion. Emotionally healthy people naturally want to comfort someone in distress, but the manipulator takes advantage of this tendency to avoid consequences and maintain control. She creates an environment where any attempt at honest communication is met with disproportionate emotional drama, The long-term psychological effects include constant confusion about the legitimacy of your own feelings and needs. Victims learn to suppress valid concerns to avoid triggering these emotional explosions. To deal effectively with this manipulation, it's important to maintain focus on the original problem, not get diverted by theatrics, and establish clear boundaries about respectful communication. Sixth secret: the love triangle. Rivalry manipulation. The love triangle represents one of the most calculating tactics of emotional manipulation. This strategy involves deliberately creating situations where third parties are introduced into the relationship dynamic to generate jealousy, insecurity, and competition, forcing the partner to constantly fight for attention and approval. The woman who employs this tactic may maintain secret conversations with ex-boyfriends, flirt openly in front of her partner, or constantly mention how special other people are to her. She may also make direct comparisons, saying things like, "John always understood me," or "Peter would never treat me like this," creating an imaginary competition where you always come out losing. The objective isn't necessarily to have an extramarital affair, but rather to use the implicit threat of other options to maintain emotional control. When you question these behaviors, she may accuse you of being possessive, controlling, or insecure, inverting responsibility and making you feel guilty for your legitimate concerns. The effect on romantic relationships is devastating. Victims develop chronic anxiety, obsessive checking behaviors, and a constant need to prove their worth. They spend precious emotional energy competing with real or imaginary rivals, instead of building genuine intimacy. To deal with manipulative jealousy situations in a healthy way, establish clear boundaries about acceptable behaviors, and don't participate in unnecessary emotional competition games. Seventh secret: the frenemy. Manipulating personal relations. Manipulation through third parties is one of the most sophisticated and destructive tactics, as it corrupts the victim's entire social and family network. This strategy involves using mutual friends, family members, and acquaintances as extensions of manipulation, creating an atmosphere where the victim feels surrounded and isolated from potential support. The manipulative frenemy presents a distorted version of events to friends and family, painting herself as the victim and you as the aggressor. She may tell half-truths or biased interpretations of conflicts, seeking to gain sympathy and support for her cause. Simultaneously, she collects information about you through these people, using intimate details shared in confidence against you in future discussions. This tactic is particularly effective because it creates an environment where you feel you can't trust anyone. Close friends may begin treating you differently based on the distorted information they received. Family members may question your judgments or take sides against you without knowing the complete situation. This results in progressive social isolation and increased emotional dependence on the manipulator herself. To protect yourself from this indirect manipulation, maintain direct and honest relationships with important people in your life. Don't allow third parties to be intermediaries in personal matters. Communicate directly with friends and family about your perspective, and be cautious about sharing intimate details that could be used later against you. Eighth secret: using the past, using your experiences against you. The weaponization of the past is one of the cruelest forms of psychological manipulation. This tactic involves using past mistakes, traumatic experiences, moments of vulnerability, or intimate confessions against the victim to gain advantage in present conflicts or exercise continuous emotional control. When you trust someone enough to share your regrets, fears, or moments of weakness, that information should be sacred. However, the manipulator stores these details as emotional ammunition for future use. During discussions, she may bring up mistakes you made years ago, use your insecurities against you, or remind you of moments when you were at your worst emotional state. Examples include phrases like, "You always do this, remember when you," "How can I trust you after what happened with," or "You're acting exactly like your abusive father." These statements are designed to emotionally disable the victim, making them feel they can never overcome their past or grow as a person. The psychological impact is profound, creating a feeling that you're permanently marked by your past mistakes. This undermines confidence, impedes personal growth, and creates an environment where vulnerability is punished instead of welcomed. To face this manipulation, Establish clear boundaries about appropriate use of personal information, practice self-forgiveness, and work to create relationship dynamics based on mutual growth and acceptance. The 8 secrets we explored today reveal a troubling pattern of how healthy relationships can be transformed into psychological battlefields. From subtle gaslighting to the cruel use of the past, these tactics represent sophisticated forms of emotional control that can devastate victims' mental health and well-being. It's crucial to understand that recognizing these patterns does not mean developing paranoid distrust of all women or relationships. Instead, it's about developing the emotional intelligence and self-awareness necessary to identify toxic dynamics before they cause irreparable damage. Healthy relationships are based on mutual respect, honest communication, and joint growth, not on power games and manipulation. If you recognize some of these behaviors in your own life, know that you're not alone and that it's possible to break these destructive cycles. Seek relationships that celebrate your authenticity, support your growth, and honor your dignity as a human being. Share your experience in the comments, subscribe to the channel for more revealing content, and pass this knowledge forward to others who may be facing similar situations. Together, we can create a future where genuine relationships flourish free from manipulation and control.